some enchanted evening this Wednesday night, January the 13th, here in the new year 2021. Welcome to One-on-One Nightly, the evening Wednesday night edition of the One-on-One program here, courtesy of WFUV Sports, whether you're joining us on Twitter or on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. We're live here on this Wednesday night. My name is Dylan Balsamo, along with my partners, Sam Davis and Chris Persianen for the night. Sam, let's start with you. How are you? Where are you joining us from? How are you feeling?
I'm in my home in good old Connecticut, and I'm so happy to be here. I've never done One-on-One Nightly before, but what a perfect night to be my first one here. I'm really excited to get into all we have to discuss tonight.
Absolutely. Now let's, Chris, this is your first One-on-One Nightly as well. This is your first on-air appearance with FUV, if I'm not incorrect, right?
Indeed. And Sam is right. What a day for these appearances to occur. For me to have a headline presenting role, and for it to be today with quite the headlines available for presentation. I mean, just what timing.
Absolutely. Like Chris mentioned, he has the unofficial position of headlines today, which is really just a third host for the show. So he'll be coming in and out. He'll be heavily involved today just because it's such a crazy show, like the two of them mentioned. Let's talk about this. By the time you're seeing this live at 9:01 we are at now, you've probably heard about this by now. The NBA had the biggest trade it has seen in terms of size in at least my own recent memory. So let's break it down. James Harden has made it very clear over the specifically last month or two, but had made it clear before that he wanted out of the Houston Rockets. And that became very clear in statements he made in the last 48 hours, but he's officially no longer a Houston Rocket, and he has joined the Brooklyn Nets. He's coming to the New York area to come play for the Brooklyn Nets. So this is a huge trade, involved 4 different teams. So let's break it down real quick. So obviously the Nets get James Harden, and they sent over to the Rockets a bunch of players, but specifically at first guard Caris LeVert. But Caris LeVert was then traded from the Rockets to the Indiana Pacers, sending Victor Oladipo over to Houston. Meanwhile, the Cavs got themselves involved. The Cleveland Cavaliers got themselves involved in this trade. They got from the Nets Jarrett Allen and Taurean Prince. Meanwhile, from the Cavs, the Rockets got Dante Exum and Rodions Kurucs. And meanwhile, the Rockets also got from the Nets unprotected first-round picks 2022, 2024, 2026, and pick swaps in 2021, 2023, 2025, and 2027. My goodness, that is a mouthful. There were also a couple other draft picks. You might be seeing them on your screen right now that are involved in this here. But needless to say, this is a giant trade. I can't believe it all happened in one day. So, Sam, let's start with you. Just when you first saw this at maybe 2:30 this afternoon, what was your first reaction? What was the gut reaction?
So the gut reaction for me had to do with the Nets, of course. I mean, we're a New York show, so obviously that's where I think of first. But before I get into all the Nets stuff, and we all get into the Nets stuff, I want to give credit to the Houston Rockets here. I really want to give them credit because, honestly, I was going to come on the show today and talk about how I just felt bad for the situation in Houston with the way James Harden was reacting, with how John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins are kind of stuck in that position there in Houston. Honestly, not wanting James Harden on the team. He didn't want to be there either. It was a difficult scenario. So I'm just happy with the way that they handled this situation because I think it takes a lot of patience coming from Houston because it was very obvious, as you said, Dylan, Harden didn't want to be there. And from the standpoint of the Rockets, you probably want to trade him as soon as possible. But instead, you held on to him. You waited for the best package that you could get possible. And that's a huge thing because obviously they got back a massive package between the Brooklyn Nets, obviously Cleveland, and a little bit from Indiana as well. So overall, I'm totally impressed with the Rockets. I'm also impressed with Indiana. Oladipo was unhappy in Indiana, and they kind of had to make a move. They got Caris LeVert, which is a huge deal for them. Caris LeVert shouldn't have been traded from the Nets. We'll get into that. But from Indiana's standpoint, I think it works out well for them. But overall, Houston, I mean, I'm very pleased with what they did. And I'm happy for John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins, who have been playing hard all year. And finally, Harden gets out of Houston like he wanted to.
For sure. I mean, in regards to Harden, I think you always have to bet on talent, and to see these teams be in the running, Philadelphia, Brooklyn, the two leading contenders to acquire Harden via trade. I mean, these are two teams that were clearly serious about winning. It's a big bet to offer that kind of value for any one player. Forget a player that is getting himself into some situations with his teammates, his front office, that not everything is necessarily beautiful all around his team chemistry. And, that's part of why he's not on that team anymore. So I think Philly would have been smart to open their championship window and acquire Harden here. And Brooklyn, I can't fault them for the move. I mean, you have first round picks to make them, and hope and pray that maybe the player you select will be half as impactful on a basketball court as James Harden is when he's half asleep. And it's just it's a matter of acquiring a gigantic talent when it's available to you. I can't fault Brooklyn for the move. As a Knick fan, as a diehard Knick fan, it close to pains me to credit the Nets on this trade, but you can't fault them for going for it. If you want to talk about, specific net players, for example, the decision by Kevin Durant to tie the remaining years of his prime to Kyrie Irving and James Harden, that's a different conversation. But if you're Brooklyn's front office, you can't be upset with how today has gone, because you brought in a top 5 talent on this earth right now.
While we're talking about the Nets, they're actually playing the Knicks right now. You can catch that game on the 4 capital letters, as we like to call it here at FUV. Right now, the Nets are leading 80-63 over the Knicks at the Garden. But first off, to what Sam, you had mentioned earlier, credit to the Pacers for coming in here and making the best possible move they could have made very quickly out of this giant trade. Obviously, Victor Oladipo had said he didn't want to be in Indiana really anymore, and they got Karis LeVert out of it. So good move for them. Chris, it's interesting you talk about how you can't blame the Nets for having made this move because obviously James Harden is a great player, and like you mentioned, he sleeps his way to a triple-double. But I'm not sure if that necessarily means it was the right move for Brooklyn to make, especially considering now that this is the first time this franchise has been in such a place of contention, and definitely at least since they've been in Brooklyn, let alone a long time before that. And with that, they've put the pressure on themselves. The window for them to win the NBA championship, and excuse my dog barking in the back, I can't do anything about that. But the window for them to win an NBA championship with this team has slightened itself so much. It's about 2 to 3 years now. It's for as long as you're going to have James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving, as we're going to talk about the 3 of them together in just a second. But they did sacrifice quite a bit of their future to get a hold of the team that they have right now. But Sam, I'll start with you. With the acquisition of James Harden, another personality in himself, and anybody who's followed the NBA in the last 10 years has known that, this dynamic of the Brooklyn Nets dynamic is going to change crazily again. Do you think that's for the better? Do you think it's for the worse? What do you think?
I think it's for the worst, to be honest. And I'm looking at this, I try to look at the positives and the negatives. I guess we could start with the positives here for the Brooklyn Nets. Talent-wise, strictly talent-wise, obviously this team can win the NBA Finals and at least get there. And I think that's honestly the realistic goal with what they're doing. They're giving away a lot of their future. So that, like you said, Dylan, it's a couple years and you got to win right now. And I think the realistic goal is the NBA Finals for them. Strictly talent-wise, sure, they can get there. If Harden, Irving, and KD are on the floor at the same time, they can 100% get there. However, like you said, I mean, we have this whole issue with Kyrie Irving. We don't know what's going on there. We don't know how that's going to get settled. We don't even know where he is. And I don't even think the Nets organization knows where he is. But putting that aside, even Harden in Houston, I mean, I understand wanting a trade seriously, but that doesn't excuse selling your teammates down the river and saying that, we just aren't a good team. Well, you haven't been playing well, and he hasn't played. I think it's been since 2011. His numbers have been that low for Houston, especially recently. He's just been not playing well. He's overweight as well, and he's just not giving his full effort in Houston, obviously. And some would say, okay, that might change in Brooklyn, but I'm not so sure if it will. I mean, to be honest, I think obviously he wanted to go to Brooklyn and he's excited to be with KD. But a guy that's so selfish like that and playing for himself and not considering his teammates, do you really want to sell so many years of your future for a guy like that? I mean, I'm going to answer the question and say no. I don't know what you guys think, though.
It's tough, and it's a good question, right? Because when you're forking over such a quantity of assets, sheer quantity, so many first round picks, as Dylan detailed, and pick swaps as well. This is no joke of a package, right? This is a serious Godfather offer. And to me, I think the other side of it is looking at what Philly had on the table. And I think that kind of answers the question of the trade from Houston's perspective. Philly can offer Ben Simmons, 24 years old, all defense potential, playmaking, elite playmaking, elite defense, cannot make a jump shot, but that's at 24, that's a hell of a base of a player to build on, as well as a first round pick or two, as well as someone like Matisse Thybulle, or a young player who like Tyrese Maxey, who I really like. And Houston said, you know what? We're going to take the reset. We're going to take the absolute just plethora of first round picks being put on the table by Brooklyn. We're going to recoup our future, and we're going to rebuild ourselves as a new NBA team. We are no longer James Harden's NBA team. We are going to be a new squad. We have the assets to sit back on. And I think that's the best thing you can do to recover from the closing of a window that just because of talent was open. For example, just to present a hypothetical, if down the line Minnesota can't sort things out and Karl Anthony Towns is starting to get unhappy, what do? You take your guy, your asset, and you reset. You take Cat, and if you think you're not going to win a championship with Cat, you turn him into as many first-round picks as you can get, and you have a base of assets to fall back on, to rebuild on, to start fresh with. I think that's exactly what Houston did here. And to me, considering that they also cut payroll, and we know who owns that team, it looks like the right move for that franchise in general.
To close this specific question on Brooklyn for a second, there is no doubt that James Harden's talented. We can keep talking about that for as much as we want, and there is also no doubt that the Nets have probably got more raw talent on the court in a hypothetical situation, mathematically, than maybe anybody in the NBA. But that is not always necessarily what's going to get you a championship. It's not what's going to get you a good spot in the playoffs, because there is a human element to it. This is actually something I have talked about before on this very program. So our producer, Alex Wolves, has this all set up. Let's throw to my friend and yours, Dylan Balsamo, with his opinion on this.
Absolutely. I think like in terms of next year, the Nets are, it's like the Beatles, where, John has his songs that he writes and he wants to do those songs. Paul has the songs that he writes. He wants to do those songs. They got to fight over when are they going to do each other's songs. Then George is like, hey, I want to write songs too. And John and Paul are like, stay out of this, George. And then Ringo is Mike D'Antoni because he's just there. So it becomes an issue, and you can have all the talent you want, but at the end of the day, there needs to be a glue that's there, and obviously it's not there yet in Brooklyn. If they can figure it out this year, great. And if James Harden is there, then good for him, and actually good for all of us, because that'd be entertaining to watch. But not so sure just yet.
Thanks, Dylan. Some great points made there. But so essentially, the reason we're showing you that is because it's quite literally what it is. There is a lot of talent that's going to be on the court for Brooklyn if everybody who's expected to play plays. we haven't even talked truly about Kyrie Irving yet, and we will get to that because we're going to talk about it for a long time tonight. But too much talent is not necessarily a good thing, especially when it is the personality of a guy like James Harden, who, has ruined an opportunity in Houston that was built for him. And that's kind of the next angle I want us to take here, because the Houston Rockets, to me, there's no doubt they won today, because the amount that they were able to get in exchange for someone who did not want to play for them anyway it's a peculiar situation to me, because the Rockets continually made moves in order to make this James Harden's franchise. They moved everything. We saw the trade they made with the Wizards a month ago. Everything was done in order for James Harden to be the center of this franchise, and he still wanted out. But this is an incredible day for the Rockets, because they got to decide the fate of their own future just with the snap of a finger today. And Sam, it's something we talked about earlier. Is for a first-year GM, which Houston has, this was an incredibly acute day of acquisitions for them.
Yeah, and the biggest thing is they control their own future, which right now Brooklyn is a big question mark. I mean, they have that short window. They have a couple years, and it puts a lot of pressure on the team to win right now. I think before this trade, we're looking at Brooklyn with a lot of optimism. They were, struggling and not playing great right now. And obviously Kyrie Irving, we have no idea where he is. But overall, with Brooklyn down the road in the future, before this trade, we're looking at this team with a lot of optimism, especially Karis LeVert, playing very well. Jared Allen, same thing. Overall, you're looking at the team and we can bank on this team, not just winning now or winning next year, but years down the road as well. And now that's out the window. And now it's, okay, we have to win now. And we go from, the team obviously winning easily tonight, but down the road this season, they need Kyrie Irving back, and they have a lot of pressure, I think, surrounding themselves to win right now. On the other hand, the Rockets, I mean, they're in really good shape for the future, and they can sit back and hopefully they'll draft well, and hopefully they'll build a better culture, which I think, honestly, everyone in Houston is if I were a Houston Rockets fan, if I were a Houston Rockets player, I'd be overjoyed that James Harden left this team, because he was nothing but bad for the team. John Wall even said it, alluding to him in the post-game conference yesterday. I think he's probably overjoyed to just have him out the door so they can focus on playing basketball, winning games, and really developing a team for the future. And if I'm a Rockets fan, I'm super excited for that for sure.
I think you nailed it there, because, as we said, they're hitting reset, right? And, they're not the NBA is a superstar-driven league. So you think about the Rockets, you think about James Harden. Even now that he is a Brooklyn Net, I think about the Houston Rockets, and I think about James Harden. So, it's impossible not to associate teams with their superstars. And I think the relationship between Harden and Houston, I came out strongly, I would say, I guess, on Harden's side, just backing his talent as the reason why you don't mind investing in such a player. But it would be unfair to not present the other side of things, which is a list: Dwight Howard, Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook, John Wall. These are guys that Houston went out and got because Harden told them to, and Harden gets them on the team, and then Harden loses in the playoffs because he didn't have enough help, and he didn't have the crew he wanted, and his teammates didn't do what he wanted, and they didn't hit enough shots. And if you're going to hold him to the standard that I think he deserves to be held to because of how good he is, which is someone in the running to be the league's best player, to be considered the league's most talented player, that he's going to be held to that standard, then you have to pay attention to all of the losing and all of the failed relationships between himself and his star teammates. Can't ignore it. The flip side is that these star teammates keep coming in, and they're still willing to try it with Harden. And these guys come and they're excited to be in Houston, and make a run at a championship. And people know he's talented. It's just, is he enough as an offensive engine to get you where you want to be as an organization? You're hoping with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, if both are present, that that will be enough. To me, for the Nets in general, and this just may be my orange and blue veins forcing me to badmouth the crosstown rivals. But if it's 2021 and the best big man on your roster is DeAndre Jordan, we need to have a dialogue. A discussion needs to be had about this. You're not serious. You can't be serious. What they're gonna go? What's the plan? I thought Serge Ibaka was the plan.
That's
And
the
then
thing. That's something else we haven't even talked about. That's something we haven't even talked about is the Nets defensively. I mean, they're going to be such a liability, and you're adding James Harden. You're not adding a good defender. So I mean, come on, like.
And I'll say Harden's post defense. Harden's defense in the post is underrated. You just can't ignore his size in the post, or on the court in general, but specifically in the post, can't ignore his size. And he's an underrated post defender. On the perimeter, though, they've got guys that look like me blowing by him out there. So I can't defend him there, and he can't defend me there. It seems so. You know how it goes. But man, what's the Jared Allen was the best big man on your roster, and now he's a Cleveland Cavalier. What's the plan when the game slows down and the floor shrinks in the NBA playoffs? Because unless you're trying to win every single game 140 to 138, I don't think you're making it past the Eastern Conference Finals. And if you do somehow just by will talent your way to an NBA Finals appearance, who on the Brooklyn Nets is checking Anthony Davis?
Yeah.
Who's doing it?
No, absolutely. I think first off, to wrap up things with the Rockets, I think what we really want to say here is that this was an absolute no-brainer for them that kind of in some ways fell into their hands because Harden didn't want to play for them anymore. And the Nets were willing to give a lot for James Harden. And they did give a lot for James Harden. Why wouldn't that happen? So you got to feel very happy for the Rockets that they got themselves out of a bad situation and were rewarded for it. So it's all well and good for them. But to talk about the Nets, and we're going to talk more about liabilities such as Kyrie Irving on and off the court. We're going to talk a little bit more about that after we take a quick break in a few minutes. But specifically, I want to draw a parallel here between the Nets, that's Nets with an N, and the Mets of Major League Baseball, that's Mets with an M, because 3-star players that you kind of worry about on the Nets kind of reminds me of a time when the New York Mets were looking at 5 fantastic starting pitchers and thought they could walk on air because of it. But when a franchise is not properly looked after, that can fall apart. And to me, this entire move for the Nets, which felt very premature, seemed to me like a move made by a franchise who's inexperienced in being a contender. This team is not, like we talked about, has not been in true contention like this in more than a decade. So it's the kind of thing that worries you. So a couple more quick thoughts here before we go to break. Just thoughts on liabilities with the Nets, Sam, and then Chris.
I mean, I think I just touched on the defense, and that's something that I think goes underrated a little bit right now. There's so much to do. There's so much to talk about. You got the chemistry, and then you have the defense. Another thing I want to touch on too is Steve Nash handling all this. He's already got to deal with Kyrie Irving going missing, and now he's got to deal with James Harden, who's certainly not an easy thing. I mean, Steve Nash, it's a first-year NBA coach here, so that's going to be certainly something to look at too. I think honestly, this team is the most exciting and fun to watch if they're all on the court. But even if they're not all on the court, it's still going to be entertaining because we have no idea where Kyrie Irving is, and we have no idea how James Harden will fit in this picture for the Brooklyn Nets.
I don't want to paint KD and Kyrie in any specific way, so I'm just going to present a scenario and allow you to interpret it how you will. Now, you mentioned that the Nets have a first-year head coach. I want to take you guys back to when you were in middle school. You hear that there's going to be a substitute teacher,
Mhm.
for one of your classes that day, you know they don't control the classroom. You know they don't have a grip on what's going on.
Yeah.
And for that reason, you, as a troublemaking child, are excited to have the aforementioned substitute teacher in control of your classroom that day because you are going to run wild and they are not going to do anything about it. And part of me wonders if Kevin and Kyrie had such memories in mind when they worked oh so closely with Joe Tsai and Nets ownership to select their supervisor. That's all I got to say. And now they knocked next door and said, "Hey, we got some kids that sit in the back of our class. Our best friend is in your class. Can we trade?" And now we have three of them in one class with a substitute teacher. And the line of defense is just they're out of snacks to offer to keep the kids in check. And I think we are going to see at the very latest by the NBA playoffs the effects of leaving three best friends in the fourth or fifth grade alone with the substitute teacher to wreak havoc in this hypothetical classroom.
That sounded like the kind of analogy that would have been perfect during the Nickelodeon football game this weekend. It was fabulous. Hey, folks, we are nowhere near done talking about the Brooklyn Nets and the kind of day that they had today. Sam Davis, Chris Persiani, me, Dylan Balsamo, our producer, Alex Woles. This is One-on-One Nightly. We are only getting started tonight. We're going to take a quick break, so stick around right here. One Nightly, Sam Davis, Chris Persianen, along with me, Dylan Balsamo, also our producer, Alex Woles. We're thankful you're joining us, whether it be on Twitter or on YouTube or maybe some other outlet that I didn't even know we do this on. Maybe on Discord, something like that. Who knows? But we've been talking a lot about the Brooklyn Nets, obviously, because they had quite the day acquiring James Harden at the expense of about half the National Basketball Association's players. So it was a big 4-team trade. I'm sure you heard about it already. Also worth noting, the Nets are up 102-84 on the Knicks at Madison Square Garden right now. 8:24 to go in that game in the fourth quarter. But we've been talking a little bit about the possible chemistry that's going to happen now that James Harden is in Brooklyn. And there was a tweet today by a guy named Jake Biddle on Twitter. I love this tweet so much. It's so funny. He said, the Nets have now acquired all three types of Brooklyn guy. A weirdly skinny guy, a guy with a huge beard, and a guy who's obsessed with astrology and conspiracy theories.
Genius.
I barely laughed. It was really that funny. But when we did our pre-production meeting for the show today, all four of us here in this same Zoom room, we had planned on talking a lot about Kyrie Irving, and now he's only gonna be 8 minutes of the show. It seems to be. But Sam, I'll start with you. Kyrie Irving has proven himself even more than usual to be a little bit of a liability, not only in his time on the court, but also when he's off the court.
Yes, that's a perfect lead-in because I want to say this. I mean, I was looking at this situation, obviously, because we were planning on talking a lot about Kyrie tonight before Harden got traded. And before this Harden and removed from the Harden situation, I want to just say that I understand taking personal time and I understand doing that from Kyrie Irving's perspective, but I don't understand not telling the team. And the only thing he says is, I don't want to play. And that's just not a good way to put it. And I need a better explanation than that. I respect his passion for issues outside of sports, for everything going on in the world. It's been a crazy year and there's a lot going on. So I do understand that and I respect that. But being more transparent with the team, I think, is a necessity at this point. First of all, he needs to say, maybe it's for mental health, maybe it's for family time, maybe it's whatever it may be that's keeping him away from the game of basketball. I think he just needs to be a little more open with that. And that's the first issue I have with him leaving. But I will say this. I think James Harden, the trade for James Harden, I think puts even more pressure for Kyrie Irving to get back on the court right now. He hasn't really played much with KD in the first place. But he really now needs to get back on the court to play with not only KD, but also Harden to try and just get some sort of positive chemistry going here. Learn how to kind of share the ball between three superstars here. I'm not worried about the Nets and their slow start, to be honest, but I will be worried if Kyrie continues to miss games, which it looks like he's going to, because I think the bottom line here and the biggest thing is getting him back on the court as soon as possible so that if he's going to play this year, he needs to be back as soon as possible. That way, him, Harden, and KD can learn how to play together, because I think that's going to be a long, growing process that's not going to happen overnight. And if the Nets want any chance at going to the NBA Finals, they can't figure that out in a month. They need this entire season to figure that out and work together. So that's why I think Kyrie's got to get back in the court. He's not going to listen to me. I don't know what he's doing, so I'm not so sure.
Oh man. I mean, from a basketball perspective, I completely agree with you. If the Brooklyn Nets are going to find success in this year's NBA playoffs, it's going to be because Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant have successfully coordinated a three-headed attack that is strong enough to take down any team in the league. They're going to need to be quite good. And when you, as Dylan was saying earlier, have three players of this caliber, your window is right now. It is open. The window is wide open as of the second the tweet came out that the trade was official. You've got to be winning. And I'd say for Brooklyn, you're going to hold Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden to the standards that, again, they deserve to be held to. These guys should be making the NBA Finals. I think it's fair to call it a disappointment if they don't make the Eastern Conference Finals. If they get knocked out before the Eastern Conference Finals, that's a failure of a year. Because you go all in like this, that's a textbook failure. There's no way around that. So you need, if you're Brooklyn, to make it to the ECF, to make it to the finals, to try and win a championship. And if you're going to do that, it's not going to be with your defense. It's not going to be with your wonderful team chemistry with Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot. It's going to be because KD, Kyrie, and Harden can play together and can kill opposing defenses night in and night out. And they need it. They need it. No way around it.
That sense of immediacy is very clear, because here's the deal with the Nets. 12 hours ago, they had as much depth as any contending team in the NBA. With the amount of draft picks they had coming up, all of which they gave up today, with guys like Karis LeVert, there was a lot going for them. But with the acquisition of James Harden and everything that it cost them, like we've been saying, there is no contingency plan if something doesn't happen in the next 2 years. Before today, there was a sense of immediacy. There was a sense of we got to win because we got a good team right now, but it also wasn't. There was something to lose, but they wouldn't have lost everything. Now, if they don't win, you lost everything, and it becomes the pressure is on for Kyrie Irving, a guy who is known to be a little flaky, and this is really he's really flaking like crazy right now, which is very concerning. And in the past, when he was playing in Cleveland, he had the man himself to help him out, but the Nets really need him on the court as much as possible. And like we talked about earlier, when there's this much personality between just three guys, it becomes a real worry of can they glue it together? And I don't know if that worry is a assured one.
No, and I think something we were talking about before the show too that I just want to bring up at least briefly here is I think this trade for Harden, I think the Nets made this deal a lot having to in mind Kyrie Irving, because we don't know the situation with him. They don't really know the situation with him. Who knows? I mean, Stephen A talked about it today. He might even retire. We don't even know if that's a possibility. We don't know where his mind's at all. So I think the Nets were definitely pushed a little bit from this situation with Kyrie Irving to get Harden. But that being said, I think you're right, Dylan. They still need Kyrie on the court for sure. I mean, the whole point of this trade and why we're talking about it so much is because of the potential that these three guys can have if they're all on the court and they're all playing. And that potential is to win the NBA Finals. And that potential is within the next couple of years. But that only happens if all three of those guys are on the court at the same time. And that seems like something that is incredibly difficult to get here.
I mean, Sam, you said multiple times, the Nets may not even know where Kyrie is. I think they might, and I think that might be East Orange, New Jersey, which is not Brooklyn. A video came out of Kyrie maskless at a generally maskless event, and 24 maybe hours later, the Brooklyn Nets landed top 5 player on planet Earth. I don't know if these things are connected. I know Brooklyn had been in Houston's inbox DMs for quite a bit, leaving voice messages. Hey guys, hey, we still want James, still interested. By the way, things don't be. They're not looking like they're going so great. Not looking up. We're still interested in James. By the way, let us know. Call us back. Maybe today is just the day that things finally, Harden's press conference accomplished what he wanted it to. I can't think though that these things aren't connected. I have to think that Brooklyn might be looking at the possibility of not having Irving return for quite a bit. And they just went out to get Durant a running mate, hoping to have all three, obviously assuming they'll have all three by playoff time. They don't make this trade if they don't think they're going to have all three by playoff time. They think they're going to have these guys back on the squad at some point soon. But it's not now. And as NBA fans, I don't know what else our job is now, but to wonder when it's going to be. It's quite the superstar-driven league, as we've mentioned. And there's a superstar missing from the league for reasons we weren't sure of and were therefore hesitant to speculate on. And now it just seems like we have these two guys in the NBA that are both putting people at risk with their actions from a public safety standpoint, that are both kind of selling their teammates short in terms of the commitment they made to them as teammates themselves. And a third similarity is that they're now both Brooklyn Nets. So it'll be incredibly interesting to see how this unfolds. You can't help but just have a load of questions for Sean Marks, for you know, I just it's what a day. What a day in the National Basketball Association overall. Man.
A great way to put it, Chris. And before you spoke, I was just about to say it is worth us saying, you know, there has been speculation that Kyrie may not be back at any point this year. We don't really know where on this flat, apparently, Earth he is. Maybe go looking at dinosaur fossils to see if they're real. But enough of that. Of course, there has been speculation that if he were not to play the rest of the season, it might be for COVID reasons, for safety reasons. But after the photo evidence we saw this weekend, the proof is in the pudding. That is probably not the case. But whew, that was a lot of Nets talk. How do you guys feel?
Overwhelmed.
It's like when you have Taco Bell for the first time in months, and you just don't even know what to. You're so used to eating healthy, hopefully, and you feel like just something disgusting has just come across your week, your day, your month. As such a diehard Knick fan, I can't feel good about having spent so much time talking about the Brooklyn Nets acquiring, again, I'll say it again, a top 5 talent on planet Earth, because that is always going to be what today is remembered for. Assuming that it's not the amount of picks that were included as what this deal is remembered for. We already, a year into the Paul George acquisition for Los Angeles are hearing about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and 5 first-rounders potentially being a bit too much. It remains to be seen if 8 first-rounders and Karis LeVert and Jarrett Allen was too much. But I wasn't a LeVert guy. I think Allen's good. I think LeVert is a super 6th man, but a 6th man. And I came out with the take that this was worth it for Brooklyn, because you're hoping to be in a situation where you have to make 3 top 15 talents work together. So can't be upset if you're Brooklyn.
Good additional points there. And also, when you eat Taco Bell, there's a certain sound you hear coming from this area in your body, and it's your esophagus openly weeping. That's what happens when you eat Taco Bell. We're having a good time right here on One on One Nightly. It's me, it's Sam Davis, it's Chris Persianen, it's our producer Alex Wolves. We are going to talk some NFL football. That's National Football League football, for those of you who don't understand those types of things. But anyways, we're going to talk about the playoffs when we come back right here on One on One Nightly. So stick around. We'll be back in a second. Are not deceiving you. This is not makeup. I'm this pale in real life. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to One on One Nightly, courtesy of WFUV Sports, right here live on Twitter and YouTube, or maybe some other place that you are watching this or listening somehow on your nightly jog. I don't know. I think you have to keep your phone on, like how YouTube works. I'm getting off topic. It's me. It's Sam Davis here on this Wednesday night, January the 13th. Our friend Chris Persianen is going to rejoin us in just a little bit. We spent the last 45 minutes of this show centered on the Brooklyn Nets and the big trade that they made today. But of course, Sam, this is NFL playoff season.
It is. And there's more going on in the sports world. I mean, this was what we were leading with, right? So we've got some stuff to get into here. We got some games to talk about here. Lots
of stuff to get into. When Chris rejoins us in a few minutes, we're going to talk about the games on tap for this coming weekend. But first, we want to touch upon, our friends who covered one-on-one on Saturday. They talked about the Saturday games of this past weekend. We want to talk about the Sunday games and make sure you get some kind of recap. So we'll go in order here. Let's talk first about the Ravens and the Titans. 20-13 was the final score of that game. And, I was watching that game closely. I'm sure you were too, Sam, because for Lamar Jackson, there was a big monkey he had to get off his back with winning that game.
Yeah, this was honestly probably the game I was most looking forward to this past weekend. This was the one I wanted to see, the running attack between the Ravens and the Titans. And overall, my biggest takeaway was the Ravens defense. I was so impressed with how they were able to stop Derrick Henry. I mean, they must have game planned for it. They must have, worked on that all week in practice, because they made it look easy stopping Derrick Henry, which is certainly not easy to do. And they forced the Titans to really throw the ball and open up and rely on the passing game, which I don't think the Titans were comfortable with. Tannehill did not play a great game. And obviously they only scored 13 points, so they did not play too well. And yeah, I mean, like you said, mentioning Lamar Jackson there, he did look great running the football. And I was very excited to see him score that big touchdown run. I think it was from about the 50-yard line. That was really fun to watch. And just for him to get a little bit of confidence back. I mean, talking about him not winning in the playoffs, I think it was a little unfair. It was just very small sample size, so that's a little bit difficult to pin on him. So I'm really glad that he could get over that early in his career, pick up a big win here on the road, and they're going to come into a very, very competitive game next week that we'll get into in Buffalo.
Sam, I will see your description of unfair in terms of assessments of Lamar Jackson in the playoffs and raise it to ridiculous. I think an 0-2 record in the playoffs, that could be me in the playoffs. And this is Lamar Jackson we're talking about. And, I watched his post-game interview on the sidelines right after the game was aired. And you could actually sense just in his voice and the way he was talking that he felt like there was a monkey off of his back. And that's crazy, especially considering the two times he had been to the playoffs before this. It really felt like, he's a great quarterback. He's a great, talented quarterback. We all know that. It felt like the rest of his team was not up to par, and that he was not the problem, but the rest of the team was. And that's something that I think often is unfairly put upon the quarterback of a team, specifically a team that is not meeting up to their expectations for that reason. So it was very satisfying to see that happen for Jackson. But like you said, the Titans in that game were underwhelming. And the Ravens were able to stop Derrick Henry. And after that, you're able to see they're kind of a one-dimensional offense, and they really proved that in that game. So for the Ravens, you got to be excited. And, like you mentioned, we're going to talk about the snowy game they have on tap in Buffalo for this weekend. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. I want to talk about the other two games. And the one that actually I was the most excited about, maybe not even because of the game itself, was Saints-Bears. Of course, New Orleans won that game 21-9. And, if you're able to step away from the fact that the Nickelodeon broadcast for that game was brilliant and so fun, and I loved it, it was also a clear display of a Saints team that was really just better than the Bears.
Yeah, I mean, better is a good way to put it. And I think it was a classic Bears game. I feel like they just couldn't find a way to score any points. I mean, they went basically the entire game with 3 points on the board. And if you didn't watch the game, it looks a little closer as a scoreboard than it was, because it was 3 points that entire game, and they scored a meaningless touchdown at the end there. But yeah, I mean, I want to give a little credit. I'll give a little credit to the Bears defense. They did play well, especially in the first half. The Saints, a little off offensively, I would say, in the first half. But I mean, you can only ask so much out of them. You know, it's 3 points your offense is giving you. It's like a well-pitched game in baseball. You can't expect any more out of this Bears defense other than to give up, at least hold their own in the first half. And then in the second half, the Saints were obviously able to prove, I think, like you said, they're just a better team. And I think Saints defense was also impressive. I mean, we got to note that as well. Sure, the Bears offense is lackluster, but the Saints defense did play a really good game. And I think next week they're going to have another chance to play a really good game against a better offense, against a much more talented offense with Tom Brady at the helm for them.
Absolutely. And I do want to say, in terms of the Bears offense, I want to give credit to Mitchell Trubisky, their quarterback, not necessarily for the way that he played, but a weird thing happened during that game. And I'm sure you noticed this, but so Nickelodeon gave out an MVP award just for that game itself, since they were covering the game. And it was voted on by fans. So it was basically like a Kids' Choice Award for the football game. And the fans, who presumably were mostly children, voted for Mitch Trubisky, the losing quarterback in the game. That's a really awkward situation. I do not envy Trubisky in that moment, and I give him credit for. I'm thinking about him really, because that must have been really awkward.
I wonder why they voted for him. I mean,
I can only assume it was. I can only assume it was a bunch of kids in Chicago who wanted to see their quarterback win that MVP.
Yeah.
And you know, if I was a kid, if I was a 7-year-old Bears fan watching my team play on Nickelodeon, I would do the exact same thing.
That's fair.
But yeah, you know, like we talked about, the Saints are just a better team, and they probably would have found themselves in perhaps even a better situation in the playoffs this year if they hadn't lost Drew Brees for a couple of weeks. But you know, Brees went out there and showed that even post rib injury, he's a lifetimer quarterback. So we just got to see that on display, and we'll see a lifetimer quarterback off on Sunday. But we'll talk more about that later. Very quickly, we have a couple more minutes here. This was the big surprise of the weekend when the Cleveland Browns defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers 48-37 on Sunday night for the country to watch. And you know, it was a game that if you're someone who roots for teams that are on the up and up, then you're really excited for the Browns. But a really tough and surprising game.
Yeah, I'm going to pat myself on the back here for a second. I picked the Browns moments before this game. I just had a feeling. I was watching the broadcast, and I was seeing how almost every expert for NBC was picking the Steelers, and I was like, you know what? Let's see what the Browns can do. So I decided to go out on a limb and openly say that they were going to win this game, but in no way did I expect that to happen right off the jump. You know, that snap over the head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a play in a playoff game to start a game. I don't think I've ever seen something like that. I don't think we'll ever see something like that again, to be honest. That's an unbelievable play. And you got to be happy for the Browns, you know, winning their first playoff game in a really long time, 1994, I believe. And that's really impressive, and that's great for them. But the Steelers, I mean, Ben, you got to expect more out of him. 3 interceptions in, I think, the first half alone. He did throw for 500 yards. It was a weird stat line for Big Ben. But those interceptions, I mean, you can't give a team that many chances to beat you and expect any chance at winning. I mean, the Steelers found a way to kind of put it, I think, within like 12 points at one time in the game, which was impressive considering they were down 28-0. But the Browns, give them credit, were able to just keep the foot on the gas and really, you know, drive home that victory. But in terms of this, from a Steelers perspective, if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm incredibly disappointed, especially with how they started the year, you know, going undefeated to start the year. And then the second half of the season, they certainly fell off, and then all culminated to just a train wreck of a game here against the Browns, giving them every chance they wanted to win this game. So overall, I mean, great for the Browns, but on the other side for the Steelers, a lot of thinking to do in the offseason for them.
Certainly. Big Ben's stat line is kind of like when a pitcher would lose a game after throwing 9 innings and only allowing 1 hit. It's basically the exact same thing. It's like it was very Cliff Lee type stat line, if you will. But you know, I'm going to also give myself credit here because I also picked the Browns, not even just to go against the grain. Not only is this Browns team very talented, and you know, credit to Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield and Myles Garrett and all the talent that they have there, but there's also there's something that feels very special about this team. And that kind of magic does have its place in the playoffs, in the NFL playoffs, somehow. It always does. That's why the Giants have 2 Super Bowls in the last 20 years.
Exactly.
But so I'm very excited to see this Browns team, especially one that was so not good for so long, continue to have success. I'm really rooting personally for a Bills Browns AFC Championship game. I think that would be so awesome to watch. So I hope that happens. But we're going to take another quick break here. When we come back, our friend Chris Persianen is going to rejoin us to talk about this coming weekend's NFL playoff games. It's Sam Davis. It's me, Dylan Balsamo. It's Alex Bowles, our producer here on One on One Nightly. We'll be back in just a second, so stick around. We're back here on One on One Nightly, the Wednesday night evening edition of the One on One program, courtesy of WFUV Sports, live on Twitter and YouTube. My name is Dylan Balsamo, along with my friends Sam Davis and Chris Persianen, joining me tonight for this wonderful edition of our show, and of course our producer Alex Bowles, who you do not see on your screen, but is vital for everything that you do see on your screen. So of course we thank him as always. But guys, and again, Chris, great to have you back in the mix here. Let's talk about this weekend's NFL playoff games. We've already talked about last week. Let's move forward, and let's just jump right into it. Let's go right into Saturday's games. We'll start off with the 4:35 afternoon game on Saturday. That's going to be the Rams and the Green Bay Packers. So, Sam, I'll start with you. What are the things you're looking for going into this game? And then if you want to give me a prediction, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll start with what I'm looking for, and it's going to be the matchup, honestly, between the Packers offense, which is high-powered, and they've showed that all year, with the potential MVP, maybe you'd say the front runner for MVP, Aaron Rodgers. Also a strong running game, Aaron Jones, against the Rams defense with another Aaron Donald. So, I mean, we'll see that matchup there. I think that's going to be a very good one. I honestly, the Rams defense last week looked tremendous. I mean, sure, the Seahawks offense has struggled and had their fair share of struggled, but the Rams defense looked great. They're going to have to be great with such a difficult quarterback situation right now for the Rams. I mean, McVay won't even say who's the starter or what the updates there. Obviously, it's earlier in the week, so we'll figure that out later on in the week in terms of that. I think the Rams are going to have to rely a ton on running the football, a ton on Cam Akers. But that concerns me a little bit because I feel like they're not going to be able to be really two-dimensional with whoever their starter is. They're going to be hurt, whether it be Jared Goff, obviously coming off of that thumb surgery, or John Wolford, who is coming off that really hard hit last week. So either way, I think the quarterback situation for the Rams is going to be a struggle. They're going to have to run the ball a lot. And I don't think that reliance and toward kind of one-dimensional play for the Rams is going to help them out, because the Packers offense is just too good, despite the fact that the Rams defense will be a good matchup for them. So overall, that's the long-winded way of saying that I got the Packers in this one pretty easily. I think this is the pick I'm the most confident in. I say that, with it's the playoffs, so who knows what's going to happen, but I'm picking the Packers here to beat the Rams in this one.
Sam, I agree with you, and that is why John Wolford is going to lead the Rams to a blowout victory. No, it's just because we're both so confident in Green Bay. You know how it'll turn out. But no, I agree with the sentiment that Los Angeles has quite a good defense, but in sports in general, right? Offense just tends to win out. Points still get put on the board. Basketball, football, whatever sport, points still end up getting put on the board. Those points get put on the board by your transcendent point scoring talents. And boy, is Aaron Rodgers one of those. If anybody can exploit the holes in such a talented defense, it would be a veteran quarterback who's not only elite in terms of his awareness of the field, but his arm, his talent in general, just his overall play, what he brings to the position. Aaron Rodgers is truly one of the best quarterbacks who have ever played in the NFL. And I think you can't leave that out when talking about how he'll handle a team with not too strong of an offense and quite strong of a defense. This matchup boils down to that aspect of it. It's the Packers offense versus the Rams defense. You're hoping the Packers defense will hold up enough over the Rams offense. You're hoping the Rams offense can just do enough against the Packers defense. The real matchup is between Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Donald. As you said, Jalen Ramsey, these defensive studs on the Rams, and Rodgers, Adams, Jones on Green Bay's offense. So I'm backing Green Bay to win this game just because I got to bet on the talent. And although the Rams are loaded with talent defensively, offense tends to win out in sports in general. And I just can't not support Aaron Rodgers throwing to Devontae Adams or handing it off to Aaron Jones, three players that I love, not just because of whatever, personal agendas, but because I really love what they do out there on the field. I think they're quite good, and they're going to have their chance to show just that against such a talented defensive front.
It's worth noting here, because I'm also about to pick the Packers here. So that's going to be all three of us. A unanimous pick. Might be the only unanimous pick we have for this. But I also think it's worth noting that none of us would take this as giving a negative assessment to what Sean McVay has built with the Rams, because that's a great team. It's an incredible defense, like we keep saying. And it's kind of a unique approach to football in different ways that we don't really have time to talk about here. But credit to them and credit to what he has built. That's why they won the NFC a couple of years ago. But talking about this game, it's interesting, Chris, that you mentioned offense always taking precedent and being the thing that'll win you things. So I don't know if I necessarily always agree with that. I think in certain sports, like baseball and hockey, I think defense actually is what'll do it, pitching and defense in terms of baseball. But football in particular, in some facets, also basketball, offense is the most key. I would say football in particular, specifically the way that the Packers play football. And that's part of why I'm picking them here. I know I did mention earlier how playoff magic has its place as a factor in the playoffs, and it does. But in most cases, it is very difficult to bet against experience, especially in the playoffs. And that's why you got to go with Aaron Rodgers. This is a Hall of Fame quarterback we're talking about. And, he's the kind of quarterback, sometimes he is elusive of that title because with games that he's playing in, I'll think about them and I will almost forget that he is Aaron Rodgers because he just goes out and plays that game every week. I don't think he necessarily always gets the mystique that someone like Tom Brady got specifically when he was in New England. But he is worthy of that. And that's why like I said, it's very difficult to bet against any team Aaron Rodgers would play for, let alone the Packers. So that is a unanimous pick here. We're taking the Packers to beat the Rams at 4:35 on Saturday. You can catch that game. Now let's go to the later game. This might be the most exciting game of the weekend. This 8:15 game on Saturday night, that's going to be the Baltimore Ravens. Very good team. Lamar Jackson coming off his first playoff win. They are going to go to Buffalo, and they are going to play the Bills, who are coming off a win themselves. And you know what, Chris? I'm actually going to start with you here because there's a very interesting factor that the stats would not let you in on that is going to play a part in this game.
For sure, and we were talking about this morning. In sports, we were just talking about betting on experience with Aaron Rodgers. Experience is exactly the angle that I'm going to be playing when I hypothetically back the Bills to cover the spread. Of course, for legal reasons. Meteorology, my friends. Are going to be in Buffalo for Saturday night's game, and there is allegedly going to be some snow. Now, I'm not saying that the fact that Lamar Jackson has never played football in the snow before is relevant here. And and I don't mean he's literally never played in snow before, but he's quite young and he's not exactly used to playing football in the snow. We know that when there is snow, teams may turn to the run a little bit more, and that is what Lamar Jackson excels at. However, I'm going to take the other side of this and say that the Bills, their experience in the snow, and the fact that they know, because if we know it, they know it, that the Ravens are going to be running it a little bit more if there is some snow, is actually going to be an advantage for them here. I hate to draw such a crazy. No, I don't. I don't hate to draw such a crazy comparison. I am half Finnish, and it is known that long ago, the Russian forces came through Finland, and despite being vastly outnumbered, the Finnish, because of knowing their snow-covered territory, were able to emerge victorious. I have no choice but to liken Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills to those very soldiers, as the Baltimore Ravens are coming to their home turf where there is, again, allegedly going to be some snow. And I'm here for a Bills win, a Bills spread cover, because the line, it's nothing crazy. It's 2.5. And it has nothing to do with analytics or statistics. It has to do with snow.
Wouldn't it be funny if it doesn't snow? I mean, if there's a chance.
That would.
Let's hope it does, I guess, for the Bills' sake.
That's like not studying for a test because you think school's going to get snowed out.
And then it doesn't. And what do you got
Lamar
there?
throws for 5 touchdowns, and I'm sitting there with my Bills minus 2.5, like the dog with the fire around him. Like, this is fine. Everything's fine.
Also, Sam, before you go, Chris, do you have I wish I had my AP European history notes from high school out with me right now, because I could have backed you up on that analysis you just gave right there. But Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to we're going to put weather aside for a second in here, and I'm just going to talk about the matchup. But I mean, Dylan, you kind of stole the words right out of my mouth. This is what I'm the most excited for this game. And I think in general, everyone in the NFL is most excited to watch this matchup here. And I think the Ravens, obviously, we talked about how good their defense was against the Titans last week. But that was based on stopping Derrick Henry, stopping the running game, and forcing Tannehill to throw it. This is going to be a lot different. The Bills don't run the ball too much. They're going to have to worry about stopping Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. And this this explosive passing attack. And that's a huge matchup to look out for here, the Bills offense versus that Ravens defense and that Ravens secondary. But I'm going to say, I think on the flip side of it, this is where the win is going to come from. And this is where you're going to get to my pick here. It's going to come to more of the weaker sides of each team. So I'm going to talk about the Ravens offense versus the Bills defense on the other standpoint. And I know the Ravens run the ball a lot. If it does snow, they're going to have to run the ball even more, but they're going to have to pass the ball. They're going to have to be two-dimensional. And that's something that Lamar Jackson didn't look great doing last week. I mean, he certainly ran the ball awesome, but he's also got to throw the ball pretty well in this one against a much better Bills team. And on the other side, the Bills defensively did not look great, despite the fact that they did win that game against the Colts. So I think that defense is going to have to step up, play a bigger game. I think the Bills defense is going to step up and is going to play a bigger and better game against the Ravens this week. I really wanted to take the Ravens, but I went back and forth. I think it's going to be really close, but I had the Bills in this one.
Sam, you're absolutely right that the Bills defense needs to step up, and I agree that I think they will. But I'm actually also going to take the Bills here, which means we have two straight unanimous picks. But also, snow or not, this is something I know. I mentioned this with the Browns, but I also feel it with the Buffalo Bills. There is a certain kind of there's a magic that occurs with a team that has not been to the playoffs in so long. And the Bills, this is a season that has felt like a very freeing season for them, with Tom Brady out of the AFC Eastern Division, with them, squeezing past getting Miami to get the AFC East Division title. There's something going on in Buffalo. And I think, not only would the snow work to their advantage, but they're also, Lamar Jackson, the quarterback for the Ravens, often gets talked about as someone who can't win in the playoffs. And like we talked about earlier, that's not fair. Part of the reason that's not fair is because he's very young. And, inexperience in a new environment, it's very tough to bet on that. So I'm also going to take the Bills, partially because I want to see a Browns-Bills AFC Championship game, like I mentioned. But yes, I am going to take Buffalo in this one. And speaking of the Browns, let's get to and we'll go back to Sam first. Let's get to their game on Sunday, 3:05. That's Browns. That's Chiefs AFC Division game on Sunday afternoon. Who are you taking, Sam?
So I've got the Chiefs in this one. I mean, that's no surprise, but I mean, certainly the Browns, it'll be nice. They're going to have their head coach back. They're going to have some players back. They're going to be able to practice, which they didn't do last week, and they still came out victorious. So that's extremely impressive. They're going to have all those things, but they're still facing a very high-powered Kansas City offense. And I think I want to back that up a little bit by saying I think it's going to be a close game here because the Chiefs have played a ton of close games this year. So that's something to look out for. I don't think that'll change. It's not going to be a blowout. I think this game will be very close. And I love the story of the Browns this year. That's why it's so hard to pick against them here. I love it. And I want to see that Browns Bills, like you're talking about, AFC Championship. Realistic side of me says, no, I don't think it's going to happen. I like Patrick Mahomes, and I like the Chiefs in this one.
Man, how can you bet against Patrick Mahomes? You can't. I'll never bring myself to do it. I walked in a pre-COVID time to a Super Bowl watching event. And with my head, I told my friends when asked that the San Francisco 49ers were going to win the Super Bowl. And yet, when one of my friends loudly made an offer of a $20 bet, does anyone want to back the Chiefs? Because I have the Niners winning. My heart had me accept instantly. I did it. I took the bet. I said $20, Chiefs are going to win. You got it. I told people, you're going to think I'm a scam artist. I'm not. I told people at that event that the Niners were going to win the game. And yet I knew the smart money, maybe not smart logically, but emotionally, I don't regret it. So it was with Mahomes because you can't bet against that talent. I know it's been a theme today, just following the talent. I'm always going to do it. I'm always going to bet on the natural talent if there. And man, does Mahomes have it. So I think if I were hypothetically a betting man, I might pick the Browns to cover. the gorge-sized 10-point spread. But I have the Chiefs winning the game, and I have them doing so at the will of possibly the most talented quarterback to grace the National Football League with his presence.
Wow, that was quite the assessment of Patrick Mahomes very early in his career. It's fair though. Perhaps it's also emotions that is making me want to pick the Browns. That's why I'm going to do it. Or maybe it's just because I want to go against the grain here. I talked about my enthusiasm and my hope for some kind of magic for the Browns here, but I also think, like you were mentioning, Chris, a 10-point difference between the Chiefs and the Browns, I think is a very silly assessment of how this game is going to go. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is a very talented quarterback, but so is Baker Mayfield. It might be a battle of the quarterbacks, but perhaps Kansas City would have the edge defensively because Browns have a great defense, but most of the talk is around Myles Garrett, so it can seem a little one-dimensional. So perhaps the rest of the defense has to step up, but I think they might. I think they will. My hope is that they will. So I'm going to go very slightly with the Cleveland Browns. I don't know if I truly believe it, but my heart does. So I'm going to go with that. We don't have a ton of time here. There's one more matchup. It's the 6:40 evening game on Sunday night, and that is Bucs Saints. It's Tom Brady versus Drew Brees, battle of arguably two of the best quarterbacks. Not arguably two of, arguably the two best quarterbacks to ever play in the National Football League. So very quickly, Sam, you first. Who are you taking?
I got the Saints. I can't go against my man, Andrew Galata, WFEV Sports. I talked to him today. I got to go with the Saints. I think the defense will continue to play well. The offense is going to be in more sync than they were last week. I like the Saints in this one.
Man, as somebody who had the 4th overall pick in my fantasy football league this year and so graciously drafted Alvin Kamara, it pains me also as a New York Giants fan to tell you guys now that Tom Brady is going to win this football game. Drew Brees, I know I'm a relatively young person making brash statements and his arm is cooked. He's cooked. It's done. It's over. Analyst time. He's going to Tony Romo it. He's done. The shoulder, the arm. It was a great run. He needs to start catching his breath. Runs over. I think Brady wins. I don't know if they win after this game. I don't know if they make it to the Super Bowl. I don't think the Bucs will make it to the Super Bowl. I can't bet against Rodgers making it to the Super Bowl. But if we're talking about the Brady Brees Bowl, despite Michael Thomas, despite Alvin Kamara, give me Brady to win the game. In a close one. It's going to be a close one because that's just how these stories go. These storied quarterbacks deserve nothing less but an all-time game, just entertainment-wise. In this face-off, this matchup here, really, it's just a marquee matchup. I think the experienced, proven winner does just that.
Chris, relatively young people making brash statements is what this sports department was built on. Okay, don't ever stop making. But
I love it.
I'm actually also going to take Tom Brady in this game. I don't think Drew Brees is as cooked as you're making him out to be. But I also just think it's very difficult to bet against him in the playoffs too. As much as I love Drew Brees, our producer Alex Woles actually said this very well during the break. So I want to make sure I get this right. I believe he said the Bucs had the highest ceiling and the lowest floor this season. There were very high expectations for them, also with surprisingly low expectations in some senses. But perhaps it's me wanting to see a Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers NFC Championship game, which would be one for the ages. My goodness. But I also just think the Bucs at this moment might be the better team. The Saints made their game against the Bears look easy, but that's just because they're a much better team than the Bears. But the Bucs are a very good team. So I think Tampa Bay has the edge here. But we have to go to another break before we do our last segment of the night. And that segment, there's some New York Jets news. And let me tell you something. It might not necessarily be bad news. It's me. It's Sam Davis. It's Chris Persiane and Alex Woles, our producer. It's one-on-one nightly on this Wednesday evening. We're going to wrap things up when we come back, so stick around. Few minutes of this Wednesday night edition of One-on-One Nightly, production of WFUV Sports. It's a spin-off of some sorts of One-on-One, New York's longest running sports call-in show, which you can listen to on Saturday evenings now on WFUV and all of the different affiliates. But right now you're tuning in on Twitter, on YouTube, and it has been a wonderful show. My name is Dylan Balsamo, Sam Davis, Chris Persiani, my partners for the show, our producer Alex Wolf. We've been rocking with you for the last hour 22. We got a few minutes left. And I want to spend those last few minutes talking about the New York Jets because, surprise, there's a head coach opening with them right now. So, Sam, what is your assessment of the New York Jets coaching situation right now? Where have they been? Where should they go? What road are they on right now? Where even are they? Should they take out a GPS? Do they have a compass on them? What do you think?
Well, I think before going into all that, I think they really have to nail this decision. First of all, I mean, this is a huge decision. This sets up what you're going to do because there's other problems. There's other things to think about too. You got Sam Darnold at quarterback. Do you stick with him? Do you draft a quarterback? Do you go after offensive line or wide receiver help in the draft? That is all there, but it starts with finding a head coach. And that's the biggest thing. And they really have to nail it after failing a couple times back to back, most recently with Gase, of course. So right now, I mean, I'm a little bit optimistic. I think I appreciate how open they're being with publicly announcing all the guys that they're interviewing and all the guys that they're taking a look at, which seems to be a ton of guys and a lot of different options. There's some college coaches in there, which I'm a little shaky on because that transformation from college to pros is already difficult, especially to go from a head coaching position. Some of those guys in college have never coached in the pros at all. So that's kind of a little shaky for me and a little bit scary. But I do like the idea that they're looking at a lot of offensive and defensive coordinators around the league. There's a couple of guys there that I could certainly see filling the role and fitting that job for the Jets. But overall, it's a tough position to fill. You've got a lot of stuff to do. You've got to worry about a draft coming up. You got to worry about what you do with Sam Darnold and the best direction to lead these Jets in some sort of rebuild and some sort of positive, optimistic season next year after such a terrible season this year that we all want to forget.
For me, with the Jets, it's you need a program builder. You need someone to come in and establish, I hate to say the C word, culture, but Joe Judge not biased here as a Giants fan. Joe Judge said it best. There's two types of cultures. There's winning culture and there's losing culture. As of last season, the Giants embodied a losing culture, a loser franchise. The Jets right now, the losers of all losers ever. It's bad. It's bad. And there's a stench that appears around your franchise if you have a true losing culture. And I think the Jets need to say to themselves, we are not going to be in position, despite our geographical location and its ability to attract free agents at times, to win a championship in the next couple seasons. We need to forgo any sort of aspirations like that and focus on setting up a foundation. So they should get a coach that can build a real football program for them to eventually plug better talent into, for them to eventually plug a new coach into, perhaps, if they get to that point. But for now, they need someone who can come in and help them hit the reset button. They're in great position asset-wise. But I like to say, every league has its X factor. In the NBA, we talked about that specific X factor a ton tonight, and that's superstars. In the MLB, to me, it's the front office. And the NFL, it's coaching to me. I think your coaches matter immensely, more so in the NFL than in other leagues. Your coaching staff, your teams, they're leaders. They're locker room leaders. And for the Jets to walk out of this offseason without someone who can establish a true culture, a winning culture at some point there at MetLife, then I think you can call it a failure.
So here's the issue with the Jets. And this is really just, to me, my assessment of the franchise in general. Every big player acquisition that comes in, whether it be a quarterback, whether it be a running back or Le'Veon Bell, for example, whether it be a new head coach, whether it be somebody in the front office, every single one of those moves, they're usually moves, they're sparkly moves. Tim Tebow was a sparkly move. Le'Veon Bell was a sparkly move. There is always this feeling that one person is the solution to every problem. Like they were the one digit you forgot to carry over in the equation, and now you have the right answer. You get 100 on the test. To use another school reference, like we have as our theme tonight almost. But that's beside the point. What the Jets need, and Chris, I think he said it very well in particular, was the way I'd like to say it is they need the Property Brothers of head coaches. They need someone who's going to come in and be like, okay, we need to change everything here. We need to take a bulldozer to this entire foundation, because the foundation is wrong. And if the foundation's wrong, you're not going to have a good house. You're just not. And I'm no carpenter, but I guess it's just my own assessment of it. But there needs to be an acceptance that the next head coach might be a transitionary one. He might not be the one that's going to be there, who has Gatorade poured on him when you win the Super Bowl. Hopefully they do one day for their own sake. The Jets are going to have to accept that. More importantly, it's a lot to put on their fans, but the fans are also going to have to accept that the next head coach of the Jets hire, whether Bill Belichick for some reason walks out of New England and decides to be the next head coach of the Jets, they need to accept that head coach might not necessarily be the solution as much as it is the arithmetic to get to the final problem, if that makes sense. But we have a couple minutes left here, and there's one more quick thing I want to talk about. As you all watching at home know, perhaps tonight was the first night of the NHL season. It's going to be a 56-game regular season, a little weird. Season opened up with the Philadelphia Flyers at home thrashing the Pittsburgh Penguins, specifically in the third period of their game. 6-3 is the final score there. But coming into today, the Las Vegas favorites to win were the Colorado Avalanche for the favored team, followed by reigning champs Tampa Bay Lightning, the Leafs, and the Golden Knights tied for third and fourth, and then Bruins and Flyers tied for fifth and sixth. But very quickly, I want to get your two opinions. Who's winning the Cup this year? Real quick.
Vegas Golden Knights. That's who I got.
gotta go with the Avalanche. I just can't bet against all that talent. I've been consistent tonight.
Fair enough. I'm actually also going to go with Vegas, and we are actually really running out of time here, so we'll wrap it up right here. It has been a wonderful, wonderful show. I want to thank Sam Davis, Chris Persianen. This has been a fantastic show. It's been wonderful to work with you guys for the first time, and I hope you feel the same way. I want to thank our producer, Alex Wolves, as always. The director of WFUV Sports is Bobby Chaffardini. I also want to thank the Brooklyn Nets and the Houston Rockets for handing us a show tonight. But anyways, this has been a production of WFUV Sports. For my friends Sam Davis, Chris Persianen, and Alex Wolves, my name is Dylan Balsamo. Have a wonderful night. Get some sleep.